So there we are, folks. That's the importance of setting up a little small working space in a permanent studio. Again, one of the most important things you can do. Now I want to move on to the drawing. For me, the drawing is the foundation of any painting. It's like building a house without foundations. It's going to crumble. Drawing and painting are two different things. We use and access different parts of the brain to draw as we do to paint. Painting's more about colour and tone and brush stroke and quality of the paint. Drawing is your map. It's a road map. It's deciding where things go. It's giving you that guide that you will need when you come to paint. And style is one thing. I mean, everybody has their own style. People are influenced by, abstract painting and modern painting, and that's fine. But I think if you really want to do a portrait of a place, which is what a landscape is, especially here in Ireland, then you would need to put the same effort and time into the drawing as you would for the painting. And a lot of people just want to play with the paint and get on with it, but they find themselves in trouble halfway through because suddenly they find that they're correcting where things are with paint, and that can lead to a poor painting. So we're going to look at the drawing, we're going to look at how we prepare the canvas, how we prepare our reference, and how we square them up so that we have a grid that can guide us through, that can help us through position, objects and things on our canvas. So first of all, let's talk about reference. In the first program we went out and looked at what to take and took a few photographs and took a photograph that we were entitling Summer Fields. Now, what I have done with this reference, and here you can see my music stand came in quite handy here to hold it, is I have gone to a local shop and got it blown up. References, if you're working from reference like this, if you're working from a photograph, it's vitally important that that photograph is as best you can make it, that you have really, really first-class reference to work from. This is one of the most important things. There's an old saying, rubbish in, rubbish out. There's nothing you can do. If you like this kind of figurative painting that looks like a field in summer and that's what you want to achieve, then your reference is absolutely everything. And you can see, if I just put a tube of paint here, right beside it, you can see the size of the photograph. And I have it on that stand because I've also learned it's very hard to find a position for it very close to your canvas. But this looks okay for me, so this works for me. So that's the first thing. So a good photograph, well taken, even if you have to take more than one, even if you have to take more than 10, do so, because it is so important when you get back to the studio. Now, next step, we're going to square off the photograph, and it's going to correspond to our canvas, which is a 20 by 16 canvas. So there we are. There's the first bit. Before we start our drawing, a little bit of a squared off reference and a squared off canvas. These actually match. There are 10 squares along the top of the photograph and 8 squares down, although some of them are a little bit hard to see there. Similarly, on our canvas there are now 10 squares across and 8 down. It was easier on the canvas because the canvas was 20 inches by 16, which meant each one of those squares is 2 inches wide. So now, let's start making our first pencil marks onto the canvas. Try and keep as little pencil on the canvas as you can, because you always have to get rid of it before you start painting. Well, as you can see, I've already made some, already drawn part of the drawing here, and if you just look and see the pace at which I'm working, it's still very careful, very slow, very methodical. I'm using the grid to say, where does this next line intersect with one of the straight up and down lines, with one of the grid lines? Does it come in at the bottom? Does it come in halfway? Is it up at the top? What angle does it run off in? Drawing is really just that. It's a series of marks. It's not really, I'm drawing an eye. You're not. You're drawing a curve. You're drawing a line that is so long, whatever. And it's just a small comparative judgment from what you've just done to the last line. Is that one longer or shorter than the one I've just drawn? Does it branch off to an angle, 5 degree, 10 degree, whatever? That's a dialogue that you have to start getting into your head. And these gridded off drawings are a great way to start that. Just think to yourself, it's like a join the dots thing, I'm working my way across the grid here. I'm looking at my reference. I'm going to say, where is that tree? Where is it on the grid? Oh, right, it's in row 2, square number 3. That's where it starts. So that's where you start. And there's, little shapes that you can see within each square where one line starts and the other stops. You can use those little shapes as well. It's called negative space to also help you reckon out how long those lines are and where they start and where they finish. There's no shortcut to this, so enjoy it. Take your time, and you'll be pleased with the result, I think, once you use the grid. Another thing you can do, and I'll talk about this in another episode, is you can turn your canvas and your reference upside down and just start drawing the same thing upside down. And what happens when you do that is that the brain sort of suddenly stops naming things. It stops saying, I'm going to draw the tree, I'm going to draw the hedge, I'm going to draw the field, the flowers, and so on. And it just really concentrates on what length is the next line? Where does it intersect the grid? You just keep talking like that, and you get better and better at drawing all the time, but that's the best way to do it. One of the things that I think that, and when we come to this first stage really with a painting, one of the things that I think is unfair to students is a lot of teachers realise how complicated drawing and painting is when you're teaching it initially as a skill. And one of the things that I avoid is, let's say, being untruthful about how much effort is required to put in to get a really nice result. Especially here, the preparation and the drawing stage. What you're trying to do is a very difficult thing. Create a lovely painting, and you say, and if you're an admirer of art and painting, you say, how did they do that? I often say the harder a thing is to do, then the more method is required. And that holds true for every piece of art I've ever created. So I've spent a long time teaching myself the correct methods and to be methodical. And we say, well, look, I haven't got the time to make a grid or that. Yeah, you have. I mean, it's only really takes you about 10 minutes to do. And it saves you an awful lot of trouble in the end up. It's really worthwhile. And it makes this kind of process of copying off your reference, and creating a drawing on your canvas, it makes it so much easier to put down that foundation map, to put down good foundations underneath your painting. There is quite legitimately a lot of ways of making art these days. I mean, we've come a long way since painting and drawing were the art form. Now they're just an art form, and so many people want to try. But like any skill, like driving or picking up a sport, or even learning to talk or learning to walk, there is a period you go through where perhaps you're not quite as good as you would like to be. Well, that's the only word for that is practice. And this is a great way to spend an hour or so. See of it that way. It's very good all around, and it will create that mindfulness, I think, that you seek when you sit down to draw and paint.